I never thought walking on cursed ground could feel so real until I set foot in Centralia, Pennsylvania in 2020. The moment my boots hit that cracked asphalt, I felt the earth breathing beneath me, literally breathing fire that's been burning for 60 straight years. If you think you've seen ghost towns before, drop "burning" in the comments, because what I'm about to show you will redefine everything you thought you knew about the impossible. Picture this. It's a cold February morning in 2020, and I'm driving down what used to be Route 61 in the heart of Pennsylvania's coal country. The GPS keeps recalculating, trying to route me around roads that shouldn't exist anymore. That's when I see it. Steam, rising from cracks in the earth, like the planet itself is smoking a cigarette. The air hits my lungs with this metallic taste, like pennies mixed with sulfur, and I realize I'm not just visiting a ghost town. I'm walking on top of hell itself. Centralia looks normal at first glance, which makes it even more terrifying. You see these perfect suburban driveways leading to absolutely nothing. Street signs standing guard over empty lots where families used to laugh and argue and live their whole lives. Fire hydrants surrounded by wildflowers that shouldn't be blooming in February. But they are, because the ground beneath them never gets cold. Never. I knelt down and pressed my palm against what looked like normal grass. The earth was warm. Not sun warm, oven warm. Like someone had left a heating pad running underground for decades. Because that's exactly what happened here. Somewhere beneath my feet, in a network of abandoned coal mines, a fire has been burning since May 27, 1962. Not smoldering, not dying out. Burning. Right now, as you're watching this, that fire is still consuming everything it can reach, growing larger, spreading deeper. But here's where this story gets absolutely insane. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not even close. Back in Centralia's heyday, this place was paradise for anyone willing to get their hands dirty. We're talking 1800s Pennsylvania, when coal was king and anthracite was the crown jewel. This wasn't just any coal. This was the hard, carbon-rich stuff that burned cleaner and hotter than anything else on Earth. When they discovered massive deposits right here under Centralia, it was like finding buried treasure. The town exploded overnight. What started as a tiny settlement called Bull's Head transformed into Centreville, then officially became the borough of Centralia in 1866. By then, the Centralia colliery was already pumping out coal like there was no tomorrow, drawing workers from every corner of the region. Picture narrow streets lined with miners' cottages, the air thick with the sound of pickaxes and the rumble of coal carts. Churches on every corner where families prayed for safe shifts underground. Saloons where men washed the coal dust from their throats with whiskey that burned almost as much as the work. Life was hard, brutal even, but it was reliable. Fathers passed mining jobs to sons like family heirlooms. Generations built their entire existence around the coal beneath their feet, never imagining that same coal would one day become their enemy. For decades, this system worked perfectly. Centralia thrived. Then the 1950s arrived like a slow-motion apocalypse. Oil and natural gas started taking over as America's energy sources of choice. One by one, the mines closed. Jobs disappeared. Families packed up their lives in cardboard boxes and left for cities where work still existed. What they left behind was a honeycomb of empty tunnels stretching for miles under Centralia. Some still had coal in them, tons of it, but to the remaining residents, these weren't valuable resources anymore. They were just empty holes in the ground, slowly filling with water and rubble. Harmless relics of a bygone era. If only they had known they were sitting on the world's largest potential bomb. By spring 1962, Centralia had already survived the worst of the mining industry's collapse. The town was quieter, smaller, but still alive. People still went to church on Sunday, still celebrated Memorial Day, still raised their children to believe in hard work and community. That May, the Borough Council was focused on something completely mundane: cleaning up the town's new landfill before the holiday. This landfill was actually a former strip mine just outside town, repurposed as a central location for everyone's garbage. Before this, people had been tossing trash wherever they felt like it, turning Centralia into a scattered mess of refuse. The pit seemed like the perfect solution: contained, organized, civilized. But like everything in Centralia, what seemed perfect on the surface was hiding something deadly underneath. The pit was filling up fast, faster than anyone anticipated. The Borough Council needed a quick fix, and they landed on the most obvious solution available in 1962: burn it all. This wasn't unusual. Rural towns across America were dealing with garbage this exact same way. Hire some firefighters, light it up, hose it down when you're done. Simple, effective, cheap. On May 27, 1962, the firefighters arrived and did exactly that. They set the pile ablaze and watched the flames consume everything: old furniture, food scraps, paper, everything that had accumulated in the pit. When the visible fire died down, they sprayed it with water until they were satisfied it was completely extinguished. Job done. Problem solved. Except it wasn't solved. Not even close. 2 days later, flames reappeared. The fire crews came back, stirred up the garbage with bulldozers, and dumped even more water on everything. Again, the surface fire went out. Again, everyone thought the problem was handled. Then the smell started. Picture the worst smell you've ever encountered, then multiply it by 10. This wasn't just garbage rotting. This was something deeper, more chemical, more wrong. The stench wafted up from the pit for days, making people gag when the wind shifted toward town. Something was still burning down there, something much deeper than anyone realized. That's when they discovered the hole. A 15-foot opening along the northern wall of the landfill, hidden under layers of garbage until the fire had burned everything away. This hole led directly into Centralia's vast network of abandoned coal mines. The fire hadn't been extinguished at all. It had found a doorway into the most flammable environment imaginable. Now, some people debate exactly how this started. The garbage burn is documented fact, but others believe the coal seam caught fire through spontaneous combustion, or that an earlier mine fire was never fully put out. Personally, standing there in 2020, feeling that heat rising through my boots, I don't think it matters how it started. What matters is what happened next. From that moment on, the fire wasn't contained to some garbage pit. It was underground, feeding on coal that had been accumulating for millions of years, spreading through tunnels that stretched for miles in every direction. And the town's response? They hired a company to dig out the burning material and seal off the affected areas. For a while, it actually seemed like they had handled it. Life went back to normal. The fire faded from public attention. People convinced themselves the worst was over. They had no idea they were living on top of a slow-motion disaster that would take decades to fully reveal itself. Because here's what nobody understood about underground coal fires. They don't follow normal rules. You can't see them, can't predict them, can't control them. They spread through paths no human has ever mapped, feeding on fuel that seems endless, growing stronger and more dangerous every single day. For nearly 20 years, the people of Centralia lived their lives while hell literally grew beneath their feet. They went to work, raised their children, celebrated holidays, planned for the future. Some noticed odd things: basements that stayed warm in winter, strange smells after rain, areas where snow melted faster than it should have. But these seemed like minor inconveniences, not warnings of approaching catastrophe. The town tried everything to stop it. They dug massive trenches around the burning area, trying to starve the fire of fresh coal. But the fire spread faster than they could dig. By the time a trench was finished, the flames had already moved beyond it. They tried flushing the burning areas with water, sand, and gravel, hoping to choke off the oxygen feeding the flames. But the fire was so hot it incinerated everything they pumped down there, creating new pathways for the flames to spread. They tried building barriers made of clay and fly ash to trap the fire in place. The fire burned right through them. More extreme proposals were floated, flooding the entire mine system, excavating massive sections of the burning zone, sealing every known mine entrance with concrete. But these ideas were either completely impractical or impossibly expensive. One full-scale excavation plan had a price tag of over $600 million. More money than the town, the county, or even the state could dream of raising. All the while, the fire kept spreading, and the people of Centralia kept living their lives, mostly believing the situation was under control, until February 14, 1981, when everything changed forever. That was the day the underground fire stopped being an abstract threat and became a monster that could kill. It was a cold Saturday morning when 12-year-old Todd stepped outside to investigate some government officials who had been spotted around the neighborhood. These were Pennsylvania state representatives, touring Centralia with local leaders to discuss the ongoing mine fire situation. Just routine political theater, nothing urgent. Todd was walking past his grandmother's house when his cousin Eric called him over to show him some repair work he'd done on Todd's motorbike. Todd paused, always interested in anything mechanical. They were chatting about the bike when Todd noticed something strange nearby. There was smoke rising from the ground near an old tree. Not a lot of smoke, just a thin wisp, but enough to catch his attention. The snow hadn't stuck to that particular patch of grass either, and the leaves around it looked disturbed, almost like something had been moving underneath them. Curious, Todd walked over to investigate. The moment his foot hit that spot, the earth collapsed. In a split second, Todd was buried up to his knees in hot, soupy mud that felt like it was boiling. He struggled and kicked, trying to climb out, but every movement made the ground give way more. The more he fought, the deeper he sank. Soon he was waist deep, then chest deep, with thick smoke rising all around him. Below his feet, he could hear something that still haunts me when I think about it. A strange whooshing sound, like wind rushing through empty spaces. This was the mine fire far underground, sucking air through cracks in the earth. Every time that wind blew, the hole beneath Todd caved in a little more. He was sinking into the earth itself, and the only thing keeping him from disappearing completely was a tree root he managed to grab in desperation. Steam was stinging his eyes, the air reeked of sulfur and decay, and panic was taking over every rational thought in his 12-year-old mind. Nearby, Eric heard his cousin's screams, saw the smoke, and came running. But when he reached the spot where Todd had been standing, Todd wasn't above ground anymore. All Eric could see was smoke rising from a hole in the earth, and somewhere in that darkness, he could hear Todd crying for help. Without thinking, Eric reached into that smoking pit and grabbed whatever he could find of his cousin. Somehow, using strength that only comes from pure adrenaline and terror, he pulled Todd out of what should have been his grave. Todd emerged alive, covered in scalding mud, shaking uncontrollably. He'd been in that hole for less than a minute, but analysis later confirmed that the gases pouring out of the opening were lethal. Carbon monoxide levels that could have killed him in minutes. And beneath him, an old mine shaft that had been filled in decades earlier, now heated and loosened by the underground fire until it collapsed under the weight of one small boy. If Eric hadn't been there, if Todd had been alone for just a few more seconds, Centralia would have claimed its first official victim. Instead, Todd's near-death experience became the moment America woke up to what was really happening in this small Pennsylvania town. Within hours, news crews arrived. Headlines exploded across the country. Politicians who had been treating this as a minor local issue suddenly realized they were dealing with a national emergency. For the first time, the question of whether Centralia could survive wasn't theoretical anymore. The town was sitting on top of an active, growing, lethal fire that could open up and swallow people without warning. But even then, even after Todd nearly died in their front yard, the people of Centralia couldn't agree on what to do next. Two camps emerged, and the division between them tore the community apart more brutally than the fire ever could. On one side were the people who wanted out. They looked at Todd's near-death experience and saw a clear message. This place was no longer safe for human habitation. They demanded government assistance, full relocation funding, complete evacuation. To them, staying meant gambling with their lives and the lives of their children. On the other side were the holdouts, people who believed the danger was being exaggerated, that the relocation talk was government overreach, that this was all a conspiracy to steal their homes and claim the rights to unmined coal. They'd lived here their entire lives. This was their community, their heritage, their everything. They weren't about to be driven out by what they saw as fear-mongering. The conflict that erupted wasn't polite disagreement. This was war. Friends stopped speaking to each other. Neighbors who had shared holiday dinners for decades became bitter enemies. There were reports of slashed tires, broken windows, property damage. Someone even firebombed a house. The tight-knit community that had once rallied around church events and 4th of July parades was ripping itself apart from the inside. And through it all, the fire kept burning, growing, spreading, waiting. Finally, in 1984, Congress intervened with a $42 million federal aid package to relocate Centralia's residents. It was a lifeline, but a bittersweet one. Anyone who accepted the buyout would have to abandon their home forever. Most of the buildings would be condemned and demolished, leaving nothing but empty lots where generations had been born, raised, and buried. For most families, it was enough. Over the next few years, people packed up their entire lives and left. The post office closed. Schools shut down. One by one, homes were bulldozed, leaving only driveways leading to nowhere and concrete foundations poking through weeds. By the early 1990s, Centralia was a shell of its former self. But not everyone left. A small group of residents refused to go. Some had lived their entire lives in Centralia and couldn't imagine existing anywhere else. Others didn't trust the government to act in their best interests. A few were simply too stubborn to give up their homes to a fire they still believed could be defeated. In 1992, Pennsylvania invoked eminent domain, giving the state legal authority to seize all property in Centralia. The remaining buildings were condemned, but the holdouts dug in their heels and fought back through the courts. After years of legal battles, those who stayed were granted life estates, legal permission to live out their lives in the town, but without the right to pass their property to anyone else. It was essentially a promise that when they died, Centralia would die with them. And here's the most incredible, terrifying part of this entire story. The fire is still burning. Right now. Today. As you're watching this video. The same fire that started in 1962 is still consuming coal beneath Centralia. Still growing, still spreading. All those millions of dollars, all those attempts to put it out, all the attention and expertise and engineering solutions. None of it worked. Why? Because underground coal fires are essentially immortal. Picture what's happening beneath Centralia right now. Vast anthracite coal seams, fractured and exposed by more than a century of mining. When the fire reached those old tunnels, it found an almost unlimited supply of fuel. But coal alone isn't enough. The abandoned mines also provided the other essential ingredient for an unstoppable fire: oxygen. Those mines are riddled with airways, vent shafts, cracks, and openings that no one has seen or mapped in decades. It's like a perfect storm of combustion. Endless fuel, unlimited oxygen flow, and a network of paths too complex for humans to ever fully understand or control. Every attempt to stop it failed for the same fundamental reason. You can't extinguish a fire you can't reach. The fire had already moved into places no one expected, through routes no one knew existed. By the time crews drilled boreholes or dug trenches, the fire had moved on to somewhere else. Today, experts estimate Centralia's underground fire covers more than 3,700 acres, stretching 8 miles in every direction and extending down 300 feet below the surface. To excavate and extinguish it now would require a military-scale operation costing billions of dollars, and even that might not work. The truth is, this fire is going to burn until it decides to stop. Experts predict it will continue for another 250 years, slowly consuming every scrap of coal beneath the entire region. The only things that might halt it are natural rock barriers or the water table, and even those aren't guaranteed. So Centralia remains frozen in limbo, too dangerous to rebuild, too far gone to fix. When I visited in 2020, I found the fading imprint of a community that once thrived. Streets that lead nowhere, rusted signs marking intersections where nothing intersects anymore. Occasional fragments of foundation where someone's kitchen or living room used to be. The cemetery is still there, though. Headstones marking people who lived and died here, never knowing their hometown would become a symbol of human powerlessness against the forces we accidentally unleash. What's most haunting isn't what's gone, it's what remains. Steam still rises from cracks in the earth. The ground is still warm to the touch in certain spots. On cold days, you can see your breath and the earth's breath at the same time, both visible in the frigid air. Standing there, feeling that heat beneath my feet, I realized Centralia isn't really a ghost town. Ghost towns are dead. Centralia is something much stranger, a place that's simultaneously alive and destroyed, present and absent, normal and impossible. This wasn't just a routine garbage fire that got out of hand. This was a slow-motion disaster that revealed how quickly the familiar can become alien, how a single mistake can echo for centuries, how an entire community can simply cease to exist while the ground beneath it continues to burn. And Centralia isn't alone. Around the world, coal seam fires, just like this one, are burning right now. The Brennender Berg in Germany has been smouldering since the 1600s. Mount Wingen in Australia has been burning for thousands of years. China has hundreds of coal fires consuming millions of tons of coal every single year. Centralia simply became the most famous because it intersected with modern American life and documented its own destruction in real time. Today, tourists visit what's left of Centralia, taking selfies with the steam rising from cracks in the earth, trying to imagine what it must have been like to watch your hometown disappear. But for the people who lived it, for families like Todd's who almost lost everything in a single terrifying moment, this was as real as anything gets. The memories, like the fire itself, still burn. If you made it this far, you've just witnessed one of the most incredible true stories in American history. If anything like this has ever happened in your area, drop "still burning" in the comments. And if you want to see more stories that challenge everything you think you know about reality, hit that subscribe button, because I've got investigations that will leave you questioning what's possible. Because sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones that never stop being true.